Hey, Malibu Pacific Church, Andy here. Welcome to our online service. We're so excited that you joined us here today. Just want to let you know something that's happening that we want to encourage everybody to be a part of, and it's called Taco Tuesday on June 1st. June 1st, Taco Tuesday. We're going to be spending some time talking about the mission and vision and the strategy of the church. So June 1st, mark it on your calendars. We will have childcare and tacos. Who doesn't love tacos? So make sure you show up, sign up at 6 o'clock, eat all the tacos you want, and then at 7 o'clock, we're even going to broadcast the mission, vision, strategy. I'm going to take some time and explain what part you play in the life of our church at Malibu Pacific Church as we move into the fall and into the future of our church. So make sure you grab one of these or go online and use the QR code so that you can sign up. Let us know how many are coming, how many kids are coming. We're going to have a blast, and I am looking forward to the future of our church. We're in the middle of this series called It's Complicated, and it gets complicated, doesn't it? In our homes, during COVID, with the family and the people that we're living with our roommates, with our college roommates, at work, and being stuck in a Zoom sort of environment with the people around us, it can get really complicated. But the thing that God did was create us to be in relationship, and God wants us to get it right. And God wants us to figure it out, and it shouldn't be all that complicated if we do it God's way. Now, today's talk, as we talk about It's Complicated, on how to make those relationships uncomplicated, today's principle will work for those of you who are followers of Jesus. But those of you who are like, man, I don't believe in all this stuff, and I know there may be a God, but I'm not really sure about everything, listen in to this conversation because it works. But I would love for you to be a part of it and try it, but you may struggle with it a little bit also. So listen into the conversation, but for those of us who are followers of Jesus, God makes a promise here to help our relationships and to keep them from getting complicated and to make them simple so that we can enjoy one another. Now, the last couple of weeks we talked about how in every relationship we enter into those relationships with a desire. All of us have desires. All of us have a desire for intimacy. All of us have a desire for romance. All of us have a desire to spend our lives with somebody and enjoy them. We have desires for those of us who have quality time, to spend time with each other. Or we have desires for people who have words of affirmation, to feel love that way. Many of us have desires to give gifts or receive gifts. Those are ways that we feel loved by those around us. But when we go into a relationship, it gets complicated because sometimes we move our desires from our desires that are very, very good into expectations that we would want those around us to fulfill those desires, and we expect them to do that. And so when we move into desires to expectations, we start thinking and believing, and it's in our hearts that they owe us. They need to give us those expectations. And if the people we marry or the person we married or the friends that we have or the boss or relationships that we have, if they don't give us what we're expecting, we're thinking they're disappointing us. We're thinking that they didn't fulfill their end of the bargain. And in that moment, we've entered into a debt-debtor relationship that they owe us. And if they don't fulfill their expectations, our expectations of them, we're disappointed in the people around us. Have you ever been disappointed in the people around you? Have you ever been disappointed with your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your boss, your co-workers, your roommates? Have you ever been disappointed with them? Well, if you have, that's when the relationship got complicated. You were in a debt-debtor relationship. You were expecting them to do something that you thought they should do. And one thing we said last week was this: don't should on people. Stop shoulding on people. So, anyway, I have to be careful when I say that. So today's principle as we jump in is to take back those expectations and put them back into our desires. But God doesn't want us to be in a relationship where we just stuff them and say, well, I have desires, but nobody around us can actually fulfill them. And so, oh, well, beat me in the back, and I'm just going to have a disappointed life, or my marriage isn't going to be very fulfilling. And we just try to, just move on with life without ever having those desires, received, and ever to experience the life that we had hoped for or dreamed of. And so we just say, well, I'll just live a life that's disappointing. Some people in marriages, what we have a tendency to do is just to get really busy or focus on something else. Or, as the 5 Love Languages book, Gary Chapman says, we start looking for love in all the wrong places. And that could happen as well, because we keep thinking that the person we married or who we're dating or the business that we're working in, well, they've disappointed us, so the problem is them. And we discovered that the problem isn't them. The problem is that the battle is within us. That those people in our lives were never, ever designed to fulfill those things in us. And so where do we go, though? I mean, what do we do with that bucket of desires? Where do we go with our hopes, our dreams? And so there was this guy by the name of Peter, and he was with Jesus. He hung out with Jesus, and he spent a lot of time with Jesus, and he became really the cornerstone of the church, the first one to really begin to build the church. It was Peter and Paul and those disciples that followed Jesus. Well, he wrote this letter to a group of people that were trying to figure out relationships. He wrote this letter to this church, and he said, hey, I know relationships are complicated, and you moved your desires into expectations, and the people around you were never designed to fulfill those expectations. That's not why God put them in your life. They're not there so that you can use them so that you would be happy. So Peter writes this letter, and he says, here's how to get what you want. Here's how to get what you need. Here's how to get a life that you desire and you had hoped for. And so in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5, he said this, and he starts off, and it's in the middle of this conversation that he's having with his church. And he says, in this same way, you who are younger, so all of you who consider yourselves younger, whatever that is, hey, I still feel like I'm younger, but I think there's a lot of people that are younger than me. So whatever age you think you're younger, those of you who consider yourselves younger, he said, submit yourselves to your elders. In other words, make their agenda more important than your agenda. Be teachable. When he said submit yourselves to them, he's saying be teachable. Listen, learn. Don't be a know-it-all. Submit to their maybe wisdom, that because they've walked this path a little longer than you, they may have something to say. Be teachable. Humble yourselves with them. And then he says, now all of you. So for all of us, and the Greek translation for all is all. That means everybody. All of you now, clothe yourselves with humility. And the literal translation of the word humility here doesn't mean woe is me and beat myself up and be a wet rag and do whatever you think that you should do to me and I don't have a voice on anything. The word humility literally means to be teachable, to submit myself, to put myself under your wisdom, and that maybe just you have something to say to me. So humble yourselves, listen, be authentic, be real, be yourselves, but be teachable. All of you clothe yourselves with humility towards one another. In other words, don't make your way the first way and your agenda before everybody else's agenda, but say, hey, I'm curious about what you have to say and what you have to learn. And he uses the image like putting on clothes. In other words, when you put on some clothes in the morning, and hopefully for those of you who are watching this, at least you have your pajamas on right now on Sunday morning, but you have some clothes on, I hope. So when you decided to put on your clothes, that's exactly what you did. You decided to put on your clothes. Humility is a decision. Say that with me. Humility is a decision that we all make, that we put on, like putting on clothes. I decide to put on clothes. I decide to put the shirt on. That was a decision I made. Humility is also a decision that we make. So he says, all of you, clothe yourselves with humility towards one another. Put it on. Make the decision. When you enter into a relationship, be humble with the people around you. Because, and he now explains why this is so important and how to get what we need. He said, God opposes the proud. What? God is opposing the proud. In other words, prideful people think they know it all. And in that moment, God is actually opposing the proud. Proud people say, I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to do it. I know how to do it, and I'm the one who's going to do it. Have any of you tried to muscle your way through a relationship and try to make it work? Have any of you had somebody break up with you, or you broke up with them, and you did everything you could, and you went and told your buds and your girlfriends, and you said, what happened? What happened? And you're like, I tried everything I could to make that relationship work. She wouldn't listen. He wouldn't listen. It was just too hard. It wasn't working. And your friends say, well, what did you do? And you're like, I did everything. I poured my heart out and I gave him all I got. And that's the point. You tried to do it. You tried to make it work. And in that moment, proud, what God is saying here, God opposes the proud. The moment you and I say, I'm going to do it and I'm going to muscle my way through it and I will make it work, God steps back and he says, good luck with that. God says, give it a shot. Do whatever you can. Do what you want, how you want it. I'm just not going to step into that situation. I'm not going to help, is what he's literally saying here. When we are prideful and try to do it our way, God steps back and says, good luck with that. Give it the old college try. I hope it works out for you. And he says, God opposes the proud. But, contrast, a different way of doing this. But God shows favor, and another Greek word there in some of your translations may say, grace. God shows favor. God shows grace to the humble. Now, this word grace or favor is it's a really strong word, actually. It doesn't translate well in our English Bibles. The grace or the favor that he's talking about is not like somebody's name, or I'm just going to give you a gift at Christmas, which is often the translation for grace. But the word here in the Greek, literally translated, it means God gives power. God gives strength to those who are humble. In other words, when we are proud, God steps back. But God gives strength and power for those who humble themselves and become teachable and put others first. Because your question and my question is, if I humble myself, if I serve others before I serve myself, how am I going to do that? Who's going to take care of me? And God says, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you power. I'm going to give you strength above any strength that you could imagine. When you humble yourself, I'm going to make up the difference when you humble yourself with the people around you. And then in verse 6, he says it again. Humble yourselves, therefore. That's why we should humble ourselves, because God gives us the power, the grace, the strength to go through anything, and gives us the power to be in those relationships that we could make it work, but God gives us the power and the strength to make relationships that are very complicated, to be humble and gracious in those difficult situations with difficult people. Have you ever met somebody who's difficult? Are you sitting next to somebody who's difficult? Don't look at them right now. No elbow time. Do you know somebody at work who's difficult? Do you know a boss who's difficult? Do you have a roommate who's difficult? We all have somebody in our lives who's difficult. In the church world, we say that God gives us all one extra grace-needed person. All of us have a family member in our families that are an extra grace-needed people. So they're in all of our lives. Every family gets issued one difficult person. Anyway, he says, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up, and here's the key, in due time. In due time. In other words, when we love the people, we humble ourselves, we serve the people around us, we submit to the people around us, in due time, God will change us and change the people around us in due time. My due time is this. I listened to the sermon on Sunday, I applied it on Monday, and I want my wife, Kelly, to change by Tuesday, 8 a.m., 8:30 at the latest. Don't you? That's my due time. That's when I want people to change around me. But he's saying in due time, what he means is, in that period, God is working in you and working in them. And the due time, and I know people who have struggled in relationships that were very complicated, that their due time was a long, long time. Been reading the book by Matthew McConaughey called Green Light. I don't know if you've read it. It is absolutely outstanding. That guy is a bust up. He's a great, great writer. And he talks about his movies, but he shared about a life experience, a story when he became an exchange student in Australia. And everything that he was expecting to happen in Australia as an exchange student didn't happen. None of it. Where he ended up, they said it was near a beach, and the family was cuckoo, was crazy. Everything that he had hoped for to be an exchange student, none of it happened. And he was disappointed in the entire experience. But what he says in the book is this: that was the most formative due time period in my life that shaped me to be the man that I am today, because I learned that I'm not going to be able to get everything I want. He learned to be humble. He became teachable. What is God doing in this experience in Australia, away from his family, 18 years old, for an entire year with the homesickness and different cultures, and the family he was living in was crazy, was nuts, and he learned to humble himself and become teachable. And he said that was the greatest experience of his life when he didn't get what he wanted. God does something amazing in us in the due time. And sometimes it takes longer than we thought. And then he said, here's the answer: how to get what we need in the relationships that we have. Rather than expect others to fulfill our needs and desires, rather than to have expectations and thinking, you need to do this for me and myself and what I want, rather than doing that, say to the people around us, and we talked about it last week, say to the people, you don't owe me anymore. But what do we do with the desires that we have, that God put in our hearts? And they're good desires. And here's his answer, and this is huge. He said, verse 7, cast all your anxiety, all your concerns, all of your cares on him, because God cares for you. Did you know that God cares for you and for me? He's saying, this is the dump truck verse of the Bible. All of the things that you're thinking about, worried about, concerned about, picking kids up and how they're growing and how they're doing at school, and your relationships with your friends or family, your work, your career, your next steps, all of the details of life, he's saying, cast all of it, all of your cares. Take the dump truck and unload it on God. Which you might say, all of it? God wants to hear everything? Yeah, the dump truck of concerns and anxieties and fears and hopes and dreams that you have, don't put it on the people around you. Cast all of your cares and concerns and anxiety on God. And you may ask, well, why would God want me to do that? Because God cares about you. God is for you. You matter to God. And because you and I matter to God, God wants the things around us to, that God would help us with the things around us. Because God cares for you, God cares the things that you care about and I care about, because God cares about us. He loves us. He is for us. So this week, I want you to take some time and think about all the things, the cares, the anxieties, the concerns, the hopes, the dreams, the small details of your life. I want to encourage you to write them down and then make that part of your prayer journal this week. Say, God, I'm worried about this. I'm worried about my husband, my wife, my job, my career, my kids, my baby, my friends, my work. I don't know if I'm going to make it financially. All the things that you're worried about, cast your cares on God. Write them down and then pray through them and say, God, here's the dump truck of stuff that I'm unloading on you. And Jesus says, bring it on. And I love you. I may not answer them all immediately, but I care about you. And because I care about you, I care about the things that you care about. So this week, cast all your cares on God. And trust me, He's got big shoulders. He can handle it. We'll see you next week.